What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Babbles Nonsense podcast. Today, I want to talk about something I feel like we've all experienced at one time or another, and it's that uncomfortable silence that happens when communication fades. You know, when someone's words used to fill your phone and now it's just quiet. But instead of overanalyzing that quiet, I want to unpack what silence actually means or says, because whether it's in a relationship, friendships, or even at work, silence does have a meaning, and that's something I'm currently learning myself. All right, guys. So let's just jump into it. This is going to be a short and sweet episode today. It's just something I've kind of been thinking about because I used to think when someone went silent, like it was always a me thing and it bothered me. I think like I've mentioned on this podcast before, like just the whole quote unquote ignoring. But sometimes silence doesn't mean someone's ignoring you. Sometimes it's just their way of either distancing themselves or their way of like communicating with you through silence. Because silence overall is a language that people don't realize they're speaking when they do it. And it's all about how we do it, right? That's with anything, any communication. Because silence can mean disinterest, discomfort, guilt, or sometimes it could just mean maybe emotional immaturity if someone doesn't know how to either have confrontation or like to not have confrontation, but to like communicate through confrontation. When someone stops showing up with effort or clarity, sometimes that's enough information for us, even though our minds can't wrap our head around it. And that's where everything is nuanced, right? That's where everyone, based on their childhood traumas and their past experiences, that's how everyone interprets everything when it comes to communication, even silence. Because sometimes, like I said, maybe someone's being silent because either they're not interested in the conversation anymore, it's an uncomfortable conversation for them, or maybe they just lack the maturity to finish the conversation. But yet, maybe with my childhood trauma, if someone goes silent, I'll automatically think, oh my gosh, what have I done? Why is someone ignoring me? When it may not be that at all. We don't have to always take silence as rejection. That's typically what I do. I'll just go ahead and throw my name in the pot there. We can take it as data. It tells us where someone's capacity ends and where our own boundaries should begin. And I think that's beautiful because that's something I'm trying to learn more to do. I'm actually trying to stay more silent myself because I'm always over explaining. I'm always trying to, fix situations where I think that I've upset someone instead of just owning who I am and what my personality is, and just sometimes sitting with silence. And sometimes that even like I hate ignoring people or leaving people on red, but here lately I've been trying to be better at it because sometimes I don't have something to say, or it's not even that I don't have something to say. It's like I've said everything I could say. Like maybe I've said the same thing 20 times and someone's just not getting it. And so sometimes I just have to leave it on red, but then sometimes and this is just, I'm talking more so communication via text, because sometimes people DM me in my Instagram and stuff, and sometimes I'll see it like while I'm at the gym and completely forget to respond. And then I'll think about it a couple days later and I'll be like, oh my gosh. But anyways, I wanted to kind of also briefly touch on why I feel like sometimes we try to fill in the blanks when there's silence, because I feel like we all do it. We write stories in our heads to make silence feel softer. And that's something, Minu and I have talked about previously on the podcast, especially when she's done life coaching with me. And she was like, we all tell ourselves stories and we have to get out of our own heads. And sometimes, I think it's that we're uncomfortable, especially in this day and age of just sitting in silence. I remember when I used to work in the ER after a very tough shift, working 13 hours and it's just been busy and balls to the wall. I remember going home, especially if I worked 3 12s in a row to get them over with. And that's another thing we need to talk about. When people are like, what, you only work 3 days a week? Okay, that's a whole nother topic that I will touch on when I do a healthcare podcast next. But so anyways, going back to the example, if I am sitting in the car on the way home from, a 13-hour shift, most of the time it was 14 hours for me. That had nothing to do with work. That had everything to do with me being paranoid about being late to anything. I was always to work early. But I would be driving home and I would just be like, overstimulated, like overwhelmed just from as many people I had talked to in the shift, or maybe it was like a bad trauma or something. And I would just sit in silence all the way home. And like I said, if I did 3 12s in a row, that next day, you couldn't find me talking to anyone. If someone tried to call my phone, I would literally hit end and I would message them and say, sorry, can't talk right now. Even if I was just sitting on the couch, like watching TV, because I was just overstimulated. And sometimes I have to remind myself, like sometimes maybe when people are being silent, maybe they're just overstimulated. Maybe they have a, work deadline. Maybe they have 50 unread text messages on their phone. Maybe work is just bogging them down, slamming them. Maybe they just got in a fight with their parents or their significant other or a friend, and you're the last, the straw that broke the camel's back. You know what I'm saying? But going back to like we all do it, we write stories in our heads to make silence feel softer. Like we tell ourselves, maybe they're just busy. Maybe they didn't see it. Maybe they just need time. Maybe, like that was all the things like we're in our heads just about like maybe. But the truth is, emotionally available people don't leave space for that kind of guessing. Like emotionally mature people, I feel like would clarify, communicate, and care enough not to let you wonder or to fill that space. Like if there's silence between you and we're talking about, I guess, a significant other or a friend, and there's silence between y'all, I feel like if we know the person well enough and we feel safe and we feel confident in being able to speak about problems, I think that's when silence feels less scary. I think it's when maybe you're in a relationship and you're walking on eggshells or something like that, and someone goes silent, you're maybe wondering in your head like, oh, are they fading away? Are they doing the slow ghost? Like what's going on? Because you're not confident or feeling quote unquote, I guess, safe in that relationship and your nervous system is dysregulated. On the flip side of that, you could just have a very anxious attachment style and nothing is wrong. And maybe you've been in previous relationships where you haven't healed that part of you. But I will say this, it's not your current partner's position or job to make you have less of an anxious attachment style. Well, let me reword that. Yes, it is their job to help you through that anxious attachment style by giving you the security, reassurance, and stuff like that. That should calm the anxious attachment style down. However, if it's more like internalized and deep, like that deep-rooted childhood trauma where everything is affecting you and maybe you haven't healed from a previous relationship, then it is your ultimate job to work on that. But you also have to recognize it, right? We have to recognize when we're anxiously attached, avoidantly attached, or whatever it is. We have to recognize that, because if we don't recognize it, then we can't fix it. Because most of the times it's something within you that's triggering those past childhood emotions that's just coming out in adulthood, and they're going to wax and wane. Like I did a quiz on attachment styles, which you'll hear a little bit more about in next week's episode. So I don't want to give too much away, but just did this quiz, and like I didn't realize that you could have like a main attachment style and then you can have secondary attachment styles pending the relationship that you're in, because we all can flip and flop. Like usually when people are talking about these attachment styles, it almost feels like this is your attachment style, you just got to heal from it, move on. But we all have core wounds. And like, I feel like there's probably been moments where your parents were secure, or your parents were, avoiding you, or they caused some anxiety in you to, that's how we form our attachment styles. And so I feel like sometimes I'm anxiously attached pending what partner I'm with. Sometimes I'm securely attached. And then sometimes I'm an avoidant. Like sometimes I'm like, yeah, don't want to be around you right now. But anyways, enough on that. I think me and Minyu are going to try to do attachment style podcast, because I've just been getting into it lately, just trying to learn like more about myself and how, I can grow as a human. And it's just very interesting. Anyways, moving on, I wanted to also touch on like a little bit of respecting yourself when it comes to the silence, because the moment you stop chasing answers and start accepting the silence as communication, you do start reclaiming your power, and it gives you more self-respect, and you start building that self-confidence. You stop begging for explanations from people who already gave you one through their actions. So sometimes I think we as humans, we want closure, whether that be, like I said, a platonic relationship, work relationship, romantic relationship. We're always seeking closure, when sometimes we have to give ourselves closure by stop replaying everything in our heads, stop fantasizing potential, take everything as it was. Like if they said, I'm walking out this door, take it as I'm walking out this door. Don't go, oh, well, what does that mean? Does that mean he's coming back in the door? Sometimes I think that we just try to make questions that really aren't there because our brain is trying to keep you safe from hurting. And so we're just trying to find a why when we may never find a why. And I think that sometimes, like if someone does go silent or ghost you or, not give you an answer for a breakup or why they're ending a friendship or why they fired you or whatever case in point may be, then I think that's sometimes where we have to start self-regulating. And that also helps you build a more secure attachment style when you can self-regulate and you don't push somebody away to regulate, or you don't have to pull someone close to regulate. And that's not me being bitter. That's just like becoming more emotionally intelligent, emotionally mature, whatever you want to put in that category. It's just saying like, I'm not going to interpret silence as mystery anymore. I'm going to interpret it as misalignment. This wasn't meant for me. Here's my answer, and stop trying to find answers when there's none there. Or there may be answers there, but if the other person's not willing to give you those answers, then you can't make assumptions for them because you are not them. And we have not lived their experience in life. We have not grown up in their, childhoods. So I always try to give people grace in that aspect. Like whenever someone, like let's say I'm the silent one and I go silent, someone can guess all day long, well, she's ignoring because of this, or she went silent because of that, but no one truly knows but me. And like I said, we're only just making assumptions versus saying, you know what? It doesn't matter why they went silent. They went silent. And that is the answer. So we've got to stop trying, when I say we, I'm saying me, trying to find the why behind things. But yeah, if something feels off and no one's saying anything, I guess I'm just saying, let's not try to fill in those blanks with hope. Let's fill in those blanks with honesty. If their energy feels distance, believe the distance. If their silence feels like an answer, believe that too. Because peace comes when we stop trying to translate someone else's inconsistency and start listening to our own intuition. And that's something I'm really working on heavy here lately, especially like I've been going back to therapy. And so just something I've really been focusing on, and I just kind of wanted to share it. But anyways, I will end it there. So thank you all for babbling with me today. If this episode spoke to you, please share it with someone who's been overthinking silence too. And just remember, for a final takeaway, people who care about you will always make sure you know it. Everyone else teaches you to stop overthinking yourself to people who don't deserve the explanation. But anyways, guys, I hope that resonated. Until next time, bye.